deck is available to you. And Dean has his deck for you. Number one, how much time we see this every day? Number one rule, what I saw, don't lie, tell the truth. Not even any, if you don't know, you don't know. And you can get back to them, because the tendency of the press is to interrogate you. And you cannot allow yourself to be interrogated. Just because the press asks the question, it doesn't mean you got to try to answer every question. But it also means you cannot have the appearance of hiding anything. I follow a rule that I not put on here that I want to share with you. It's called the Zumwalt rule. And what Admiral Zumwalt told us when I was a major at Fort Leavenworth, when you go before the Congress or you go before the press, I want you to have three things you want the American people to know about. The first question you get asked, you tell the press the most important thing you want the American people to know. What is the number one thing you want the American people to know? The second question you get asked, regardless of what it is, you tell them the second most important thing you want the public and the people to know. And the third question, Professor Jackson, is you repeat the answer to number one. Because you talk to the press to speak to the people. Does that make sense to folks? You're speaking to the press to speak to the people.
Yes.
And it's important that when you go there, you have to have it clear in your mind. What is the most important thing I need the people to know? And you say that, and then you have number two. And on the third question, regardless of what they ask, you repeat number one. And then you can go on with their fixed questions. If you don't want to hear or read about it, don't say it and don't do it. One of my ethics class I took on a master's program was, if you can't stand to see it on the front page of the paper, don't do it. Do not do it. Because that's where we'll go again in a disaster. Will make you look stupid, and the press will tell everybody. I'm a big fan on national projects to do early morning press availability. I do them early in the morning because Washington, D.C. works off the 7 and 8 o'clock news. And then if you're not available for those 7 o'clock news feeds in Washington, somebody else who doesn't know nearly as much as you know about this will go say something, and then you're going to spend the rest of the damn day trying to fix it. That's been my experience. Provide information to the public, push information out through your public affairs. I never would answer, how do you feel about questions? I just wasn't raised that way as a military officer. How do you feel about not being here earlier? Well, I can tell you where we were and how long it took us to get here. And then I would go on to the next thing I wanted to talk about. But I stayed away from it. I would not go on nightly talk shows like right now. I would not go on Chris Como or Don Lemon if I was still in uniform. Now, I go on those shows now, and I go on Brian Williams, but I'm no longer in uniform. I'm an old retired guy. But I never would do those programs because they've got 24 hours to get ready to blow you out of the water. And they're not going to just ask you questions they don't know the answer to. You got to assume every question they ask you, they already have an answer from somebody else, as just a piece to keep in mind. When we doing press, I'm still a big fan, and I learned that from Katrina. I would never do press conferences inside. The people outdoors suffering, that's what we're going to do the press conference. Even in the rain, we would go in a tent. Because the press get too comfortable in those 7 degrees room. They sit down in those comfortable chairs. No, we're going outside. I'll tell you what you need to do outside. And the Army's outdoor sport. That's just my culture. Keep your boss informed. Make sure you know what he's saying. And I'm a big no on prepared remarks. Some of these leaders get up and they're reading 3 pages of prepared remarks. No, you got to be wheeling and dealing. That does not give people confidence. Don't do politics, focus on the mission. And on the right side of leadership as it relates to the topic we're talking about, the core piece of it. But let me tell you, if you're in charge, you better be prepared to deal with the media. And arriving on the scene, you got to add calm. That is not the time to figure out who done it. Because if it's bad enough and you got to go to the scene, you got to add some calm, not chaos. Put some calm in there. Look for quick wins. Make people comfortable. Cover the dead. I mean, whatever you have to do, look for something that can make some quick wins. And empathizing and making sure people know that you're going to do everything. Remember that line 6 there? We talked about that earlier. Collaboration is key. Who else need to know? And you need to be working that with your staff. Public information is critical. And you got to give media access. If you don't give them access, remember, they will go speak to somebody else. And more than likely, there's one of your competitors out there just can't wait to tell them what they think that you have done wrong or have failed to do. And as we learned from many times in watching examples of some of our leaders in Louisiana, if you look back at Katrina, Mayor Reagan, you can't get too colloquial, you can't get too cool. And as we watch even today, politicians, you just can't go out and say anything you want to say, because that will come back to bite you. Don't play the blame game. I think that's enough out of that one because you have a hard copy of it. I would suggest you put that one in your leader book.
Great. Well, John, we're right at the top of the hour. We're going to go ahead and take a quick 10-minute break and allow you to refresh and get ready for the second half of tonight's presentation. So, folks, we're going to take a quick 10-minute break at this time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can put up the audience digestion question for you. And I'm going to reshare again for us so that we'll be ready. And you can actually chat in your responses, if you will. Right here. So as we take a quick break, so we want you to just kind of ponder based on General's impactful conversation and dialogue tonight. So the question at hand is, what steps can public-private organizations take to proactively prepare for future crises and restore public trust in leadership? Very impactful question around what's going on in our nation, what's going on in our world. So how can we restore public trust in leadership? All right, so we'll be returning at about 7:12. We're going to take that 10-minute break, and we're going to come back and continue the conversation and the dialogue. If you want to go ahead and start chatting in your responses in the chat space, you can after you come back from the quick break, and we'll take it from there. Thank you, folks. Okay, folks. Hopefully everyone is back at this point. We had some technical difficulties there with the screen share, but we're going to navigate through this. We can master technology. I learned that in high school. Welcome back, General. So let's see what responses that we've gotten at this point regarding our audience digestion question in terms of specifically how do we start to gain that trust back in our public leaders. There's a lot going on in our world, a lot going on in our spaces at this point in time. So definitely a very meaningful, very poignant question to really unpack and really help us to be strategic in our processes and really helps that organization to really move forward. You mentioned Jeff Smith with FedEx. And one of the things that Smith said is that he created Fred Smith, he created a people first environment that was very crucial for him. He wanted to make sure that his employees always knew where to go get answers and get solutions. So he really was impactful and intentional around creating that people first environment so his organization can be successful. All right, so let's look through some of the responses that we have at this point. Thank you, audience members, for participating and providing context around our poll question. So if you want to unmute yourself at this point in time without my having to read all of these responses, you can at this time and just give your input, just maybe 2 or 3 individuals, and then we move forward with tonight's presentation. All right, who wants to unmute themselves and respond to the general in this regard? Do I have any takers?
I'll take this on.
Okay, Philip, go right ahead, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so my answer to this one would be to be truthful of successes and failures and sharing information of what you learned and then implementing plans from what you learn of those failures.
Okay, great. Absolutely. Definitely. All right. Anyone else? Thanks, Philip, for sharing.
Very good.
Yeah, this is Brian Dixon on proactively preparing. I think it's crucial for organizations to really think through the media piece. It is not easy to get in front of a camera, especially with press asking you questions, but it's very much a learnable skill. And in a few sessions, especially bringing some professionals, you really can train your mid-level people. And that's essential for keeping trust in your organization if they're having to communicate on something that's happening on the campus or some location. I also think that providing good training for your folks on social media and thinking through how you participate in that particular sphere is crucial when a crisis happens, so you have credibility to communicate what your organization is doing to respond.
Excellent, Brian. Thank you for your contribution. Anyone else? So I have just one I'll read for you, General, from the chat. Rachel Sanderson said, be honest about what you do, and more importantly, what you do and what you don't know. And for what you don't know, explain how you're going to work to find an answer. So just kind of being authentic to yourself is what she's saying, and really being honest about the things that I do know and the things that I don't know. Then I'm not going, as you said earlier, try to make up things and fudge the answer, but really being intentional around being authentic in that process. So I had a question for you, General. Go ahead.
Go ahead, sir.
So one of the questions that I had, you mentioned earlier about empowerment, and I think that's an important strategy for organizational leaders, and then the delegation piece and the empowerment piece. So how do I like what Steve Jobs says. He said, we hire smart people, but then we don't let them do the jobs that we hired them to do. So it's important that we do have and surround ourselves with people who are smart, people who are intelligent, who can add value, who can augment. But how do we help our leaders to empower others and delegate to others? What's been your experience, and how do you successfully coach a leader? The adage is only secure leaders give away power. So how do we help leaders to be secure enough to delegate and to coach others upward?
Well, I think there's a couple of angles I'd like to take. Number one, it's imperative as a leader to create a team. Because what team does, a team builds confidence. And when we have confidence in one another, confidence builds trust. Because when we've got confidence in what we do and in each other, and that's why you have to have a team and form a team, because you can go from a declared team to a functional team that has confidence in each other. And when we have confidence in each other, it builds trust among one another, that this teammate is not going to make a decision for personal gain. They're going to make a decision that have the team achieve its objective. You with me?
Yes, sir.
And when people are not second guessing the motives of why somebody made a decision. In other words, you have a team and we know we're all working on the same mission. Trust builds speed. And speed has a value. Have you ever seen a group, or of course you've been on a group that's dysfunctional? I mean, if you're an adult, you somewhere along the line been in a group that was dysfunctional. And one of the attributes of a dysfunctional organization is they might call themselves a team, but they don't operate like a team. And they don't have trust among each others. And they don't trust the leader, and the leader don't trust the subordinates. The opposite of that, if you're on a well-functioning team or you created one, the way you get to team plus confidence is that everybody's focused on the mission. Everyone has confidence in each other. And when you have confidence in each other, that leads to trust. And trust leads to speed. You can make decisions quicker. You don't get to right before we about to execute, somebody say, well, maybe we want the lawyer to look at this again. How many opportunities has been missed that way? You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
So speed has a value in your decision making. And because speed can save lives. Speed can create things. There's probably 10 guys who thought about what Fred Smith did, but they never pulled the trigger on it. You with me? He got it.
Yes, sir.
You with me? And the
Yes,
same
sir.
thing with Bezos at Amazon. People were thinking about it, but he pulled the trigger. And it takes that building that team. And same thing, you can go back and you can look at the example of Gates at Microsoft. And there's a book came out a few years ago, Malcolm's book, that talk about if you do something for so many thousand hours, it makes you competitive for a Nobel Prize. What's the name of that book, Doc? It's
Outliers. Malcolm
Outlier. That's it. If you hadn't read that book, read it. Make sure your kids read it.
I assigned that in my class.
Yeah. So it opens the door that if you're willing to invest in yourself, one of the quick stories out there, one of the coaches told one of our greatest basketball players, I think it was Jordan, said, you know, you're not good at this. You ought to find something else to go do. But what he didn't know was Michael Jordan would go home in the evening. He'd wake up in the morning with a basketball. He'd go to bed at night with a basketball. And we know the rest of that story, right? He could not measure the commitment of him to that. He put that 7,000 hours in. And we know the rest of that story. So that's where we get to that point about team and trust. Because trust builds speed. And when you got speed, who do you want to have the ball last? You understand? And that's how nobody watched how much practice Kobe Bryant put in. Nobody watched Muhammad Ali when he was at the top of his game, that he was out running at 3:30 in the morning. That wasn't on television. But you know, the best they are at their game, they prepare. And all we get to see is that moment in time, that clutch shot at the end of the game or that punch at the right place. We don't see the preparedness they did, those 7,000 hours. And thanks, Dean, for reminding me about that book. That's a great read. But it takes us to that point that you understand if you're doing teamwork, it has to be a team. Everybody's committed to it because team, confidence, trust builds speed. There ought not be a question of who we're going to send the ball to. We're going to send it to the guy that can shoot it. Okay? That's trust. That's how we get it done.
So how do we start the connection piece, General? I think that's impactful for teams and impactful for organizations, showing the care and the compassion that our employees need, that we're valuing who they are. So if you will, give us some anecdotes on how do we start to really move the needle in that space with connection, because that's huge for organizations. We're disconnected, and COVID-19 certainly isn't allowing us to connect on levels that we perhaps would have connected in the past. So how do we start to have conversations around connecting with our employees, showing that we care about them, showing them that we value them?
You know, I've seen some great examples going around some the companies, Johnson & Johnson, Coca-Cola, Google, McDonald's. Inside their workspace, they do a lot of investment on people stuff. They don't have normal, and I've been to Walmart. Walmart's a little different. They don't do stuff like everybody else. So I want to use them as an example, even though they make a lot of money. But what I noticed at some of these, they have space for people to join a conversation. So I'm opposed to going into a 4x6 cubicle, off their break room, they have these little, like you would go in a cafe and it has a booth where 4 people or 5 people can sit. And as opposed to going in a straight up office, they go by and the Starbucks coffee is there, snacks are there, they meet, and they're having a meeting, not the way you and I grew up, Dean Andrews, with the boss at the head of the table, and they're meeting in informal, almost social settings. And they have nice benches and park around the business building place where people in nice weather can go outside and do business. You see there's an attention in sharing in the bounty of success that the employees are treated like they're a guest in the organizations. There's an emphasis on taking care of the employees and doing things for them. I think that goes a long ways toward showing people that you care. Metrics on certain things, on recognizing excellence, those programs I think are effective as long as they don't become not relevant. You know, we've got to grow from who got all their reports in on time to who got the toughest report in on time. And we can't run an organization like they tried to show us in the 90s that everybody is a winner. No, there's some among you that are better than others. Okay? Everybody don't get a trophy. So that's my own personal bias. But I think working that team around trust, and then that connection between big corporations and even some universities I go to, some of the universities I go to, you should see the faculty lounge or see the business school cafeteria. They have a cafeteria for the business geeks, Doc. University of Virginia, it's like, you got to be kidding me. It's unbelievable what you can do when you have money. But that idea, then they invite alumni back and business people, and they just go in, and the students should come in and browse around in the business school cafeteria and have lunch with the students. I mean, how cool is that? I didn't grow up in that environment, but I appreciated when I saw it. And it tells you the value of what can happen when you create the resources to do it. And that gave me a sense that those students had the perception, and that's probably a $70,000 or $80,000 a year school, but it gives them that they're on game, you understand? And they're engaged. Can we do the same thing at a public school? Yeah. And I see Dean Andrews does it all the time. When he's engaging these students, he'll have something there for them, snack on, and doing the best he can to make that connection. Because students are always hungry. I don't care damn where you go. But he makes that connection with them. And I think those are the things that show people that we care.
So how do we create that intentionality around buy-in? So I like what Dr. Marshall has and Dr. Renita Marshall in the chat. She says, having a strategic plan, A, B, and C with input and buy-in from stakeholders. That is crucial, General. That is a critical component to have that onus, to have that buy-in for all stakeholders. So what have been some examples that you've seen this work well in organizations?
Well, as we said, the plan seldom survive contact with the enemy. So when we think we have the plan for 6 months or we have it for a year, then it is imperative that we spend some time what we call in the military war gaming. What are some of the things that could take us off plan? Then we set up the priority information requirements that inform us that if this one facet, interest rates going up, we're not going to be able to execute this plan. But we've got to know early as possible, Doc. So what are the priority information that we need to stay on plan? And what are those priority information requirements we need that indicate that we have to change? Because the plan is no longer viable, either because of resources or there's a change in the market. So I would say develop your plan, develop your strategy, develop your operations for executing it. But once you get all that stacked on the rack, then spend a little bit of time on what would take us off plan. And then you put priority, we in the military, we call them PIRs, priority information requirements. If this happens, because when you go back to a plan, you never have all the information you need. We make assumptions. I don't care who you are. You make assumptions at the top of the plan. And the assumptions are that the interest rate will be at this level. The assumptions are it will not flood. Because if it floods and you're at Southern University, it's going to change everything. We're going to stop and take care of people. You with me?
Yes, sir.
One of those priority information requirements. I don't think I have that in either of my books, Doc, but I think they're imperative to business. And I don't know what the parallel is in business, but to execute your strategy and your plan, then what are the assumptions you made on the top? In the military, we even state the assumptions in the plan. So anybody who picked this plan up that were not involved in writing it, they can go to that chapter and say, what were the assumptions we made when we drew this plan up? because those assumptions need to be on your dashboard that this plan is based on. Why do you use assumptions? Because you never have all the answers.
General Honore,
Yeah.
in your book, you talked about Main Street, Wall Street, and Railroad Street.
Mm-hmm.
How does society bring everyone together in terms of developing the trust that we need to move forward in society? We can't afford to leave people behind. It seems like we've left a lot of people behind.
Yes, we have, and it's been going on for 238 years, and we need to fix it. You know, we always talk about the new normal, but we come to a point now that normal wasn't good enough. You know, going back to normal. Normal wasn't good enough. We got to change what we assume and what we accepted to be normal. And the parallel of that vignette on talking about Wall Street, Main Street, and Railroad Street is a direct relationship to how we see our society, our nation is divided economically. That when the White House talking about protecting Wall Street and make sure we got a good stock market, and all the administrations talk about that. Or when they say we're going to invest in Main Street, vice Wall Street, and you just see them argue back and forth about it. Must be something come with the notion of being a politician. But they don't mention Railroad Street. Because Railroad Street is not Main Street. You can take you, and it's most pronounced in the South, but it's also up north. You go to that point in town because it's not just a metaphor, it's a place. You cross the railroad tracks and things look different. On railroad streets, you're most likely to see the industries there. So you got issues with air. You don't have the best of schools on Railroad Street. You don't have the best grocery stores if there's one actually there. You may have in America a 50% high school graduation rate. And when kids don't graduate from high school, one of the attributing factors is that they become disengaged in school by the time they're 14 years old. Because there's another study that came out from the Children Defense Fund that said, if you're not reading at, when you're 10 years old, if you're not reading at the proper grade level, there's data to be drawn to determine how many prisons we're going to need in 15 years. And some cities did that study because it's a direct relationship to kids who drop out of school to where they're going to be in 10 to 15 years. And that's Railroad Street. It doesn't mean everybody coming out of Railroad Street is tagged. I came off Railroad Street, came out straight out of poverty. I told y'all last week about the 2 televisions. We went to outdoor bathroom. We were poor. It doesn't predetermine where you end up, but too many people on Railroad Street, they don't get to go to a good school. I had the burden of having to ride over an hour in the morning to a school when there was a school maybe a half mile from my house. But I had to get on that bus because we're still dealing with the issues of segregation. So when you hear the politicians talk about Wall Street and they argue with each other about, oh, I'm talking about Main Street. I want to talk about people on Main Street. There's another street in this town, and it's called Railroad Street. It's where the poor people live, and it's associated with in the colloquialism that I learned on Southern. It would say across the track. Let's go across the track and get some real down home cooking. Where is the track? and you show me where that track is in the city, and it generally defines that definition between Main Street and Railroad Street. And then above that, we got Wall Street. That's at that phantom financial sector that exists in all of our communities. But we have a 3-tier system here, and the kids on Railroad Street have a higher probability of becoming a statistic. They'll become loners and not donors. And in a way, when we pick those babies off the street, those babies came off Railroad Street. They are headed to Main Street on their way to Wall Street one day because their mama moved them out of that environment. So we can move out of that, but it's imperative that we understand that when we get in these adult conversations down at the legislature, and we're talking about we got to take care of Main Street, somebody better worry about Railroad Street, because there's healthcare problems down there. There's mental health issues down there. And when you are poor, you are not free. Now, this may upset some people. I grew up poor. We didn't decide. One of the undercurrents of freedom is you get to make decisions about where you're going to go, where you're going to live, what doctor you're going to see, what school you're going to go to. Poor people don't have those decisions. When you poor, they assign a doctor to you that you can go to. When you are poor, you don't go to the school you want. You go to the school that they tell you can go to. So that you don't go to the dentist when you want, you go to the dentist when you need to. And for the first 15 years of my life, I went to the dentist when we had a toothache. And by the time I was 35 years old, I'd lost much of my dental work. Have been lost because of poor dental health in my early years. So let's not forget that there's 3 streets in America. And it's not just a metaphor, Railroad Street. In most towns, it's a physical place. It's called the track. And let's not forget about Railroad Street. For every investment we make in Railroad Street, that those children graduate from high school and either go into trades or go straight into community college or go into college, that is an investment in the future of our nation. It costs, because the probability of them getting in trouble because they end up in a contraband economy, it costs more to put somebody in incarceration than it does to keep them in college. About $62,000 a year. How much does it cost to put a student through Southern a year?
About 20,000.
Okay, so 20,000, we could have 3 of those kids in college as opposed to having them whittle away in the incarceration system. So investing in Railroad Street is one of the best investments we can make for the future of our nation. That is where the investment needs to go. And it's not working that way, but we got to fix that. And for the young folks on here, the greatest generation didn't get this right. There's a lot of things the greatest generation got good. We didn't get this right. That's got to be fixed. We got to fix Railroad Street because that is a part of the future of this nation. And right now, what we're doing for the absence of Railroad Street, we're importing kids. They're coming in from other nations and filling those requirements we got in our community.
So, Jonah, there are a couple of comments in the chat around transparency, around authenticity, around telling the truth. So how do we create that narrative moving forward from a leadership perspective, doing what you say that you're going to do, kind of the 5 practices when leaders kind of model the way they do what they say they're going to do, and they align their values with the organization's values and align all of those values around the employees' values. So how do we create that narrative moving forward? There's a lot of miscommunication, a lot of distrust in our current democracy. How do we create a sense of authenticity and trust and a path and a journey forward?
Well, as I tell folks, you can learn as much from bad leadership as you can from good leadership. And you can take a lot of notes today. Good Lord. At the top of the hour in every news section. Not to do that when you are in charge. We don't do things like that. We don't talk about people. We don't disagree people. We don't curse at people and attack them personally when you're the leader. That being said, I think it comes back to that a couple points that I learned along the way in the Army that worked for me. Your audio and your video has to match. Okay? So you can't create an environment where you tell people, you do as I say, but don't do as I do. You with me?
Yes, sir.
I've seen so many organizations ask you to go and do a little consulting work, and you see that their C-suite privileges, you understand, that are not, that are just not right. The C-suite have coffee, but nobody else have coffee available to them. You with me? And you start seeing it upon entering the organization. You with me?
Yes.
So your audio and your video has to match. Because if they don't, and you get into this, do as I say, don't do as I do, you got problems. Safety is always a problem when you got people physically out doing something. And one of the things I tell leaders about when you got things moving and people moving is go to the first line of leadership where the supervisors know people by name. And you ask that supervisor, what is the circumstance that the next accident will happen at? And who is going to be at the center of that accident? And I've done it repetitively in Army formations. And normally it's a sergeant or a captain said, it's going to be that machine and it's going to be that guy standing right over there. They know. They know as soon as they hear a truck turned over, 9 times out of 10, who done it before they mention their name. I think we have to use that as leaders to get to know our people, but you have to get at that level of leadership where you have that level of risk and get to know people and ask people, where's the next accident going to happen and what will probably, is it a machine or is it a piece of a corner on the campus? Or is it a building? And by and large, you can put together a mosaic, a picture of the most probable place and who's going to be involved. When we had 21,000 troops in the 1st Cavalry Division. I was assistant division commander, and the boss went to Bosnia for a couple months, and we had a couple accidents. And I went draconian over accidents. So I called the safety people in, because I always learn, data will tell you something. I said, show me what data you can tell me about accidents, their frequency, age group, when they happen. So they put a SWOT chart up. Guess what? Most of our accidents that involve serious injury or death was young people, young, single males between the age of 18 and 25. And 95% of them happen between Thursday night and Sunday night. Whoa, wait a minute. What's going on between that? I mean, some of you might say, well, that's intuitively obvious. But we've got to figure out how we're going to deal with the data, because data will tell you where the problem is. It may not tell you how to solve it, but it'll tell you where that problem is being created. So I think collectively bringing all those pieces together are important to figuring solutions to issues that we're dealing with. And I want to thank you and Dean Antrim for asking that question about Railroad Street. And I certainly will do any follow-up, because that's a big part of one of my books. Don't forget about Railroad Street. And don't forget about establishing that trust among people. And there are people in the organization. Remember, we got those 3 groups. 10% of the people in your organization, you don't have to worry about it. They'll laugh at all your jokes. They want your job. And you better watch it, because if something happened to you, they'll fight to take your job. And there's a group in the middle. All they want to do is their bureaucratic tasks. They want to do well. They don't want your job. They want to be left alone. They want to be good bureaucrats. They want to be good employees, take care of one another, because they don't want to move. And then there's 10% in your organization. All they do between breakfast and lunch is figure out where the hell they're going to lunch. And you need to know who they are, so when it's time to thin the herd, you know who to send out.
So, General, I guess the question, and I guess our final question for you today as we start to wrap up tonight, is around how do we, Dean, I see hand, Dean Andrews, have a question around the uncomfortable conversation, and how do we encourage employees to speak up? There's a comment in the chat around inequity, and how do we encourage employees to speak up, and how do they speak up, and how do we create the space and the capacity and that psychologically safe environment and culture for employees to speak up regarding inequity? What's been your practice, and how do you help people to do that?
There's 2 techniques. Leading by walking around and asking people open-ended questions.
Okay.
How you doing today? And be ready for that pause. Because there's a lot of things going through, particularly if that person is a very junior personalization, whether they can confide in you of how things are going today. Just watch Undercover Boss every now and then. When there's no indication that this person is the boss, and the stranger comes in and says, how things going around? Oh, hell. Well, we make it our objective. We selling everything we got to sell, and we're going to make this happen. If only they had a better communication system and a better uniform for us to wear, or we had a better computer, we could sell twice as much. Just remember, you could get one of those nuggets by just asking people how they do it. And be prepared to listen. There was an old adage that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Be patient when you ask people. And sometime as we get older, we have a tendency to answer our own question. And I'll give you an example of a colonel walking in his mess hall or his cafeteria. And his intent is to ask the soldier, how is the food? And some of them I've seen it. How's the food? It's good, isn't it? Well, you just answered your own question. How's life in the dorm? It's good, isn't it? We got great dorms. Well, don't answer your own question, please. And then number 2, set with people 2 down from you in your rating chain, if I use that word. And ask them to share with you on a plain piece of paper what we need to start doing, what we need to stop doing, and what we need to continue doing. And just take that for what it is. Because they'll have a perspective on the operation. Only secure leaders will do this. People that are scared to do this, you too much into management. And you've lost reality, because if you think everything is going good, just ask your kids sometimes, sit down with them and say, okay, write down for me what we need to start doing around this house, what we need to stop doing, and what we need to continue doing. And you sit there with them, tell the honest to give you your list. You look at it, and you don't have to say nothing about any of it other than for a point of clarification. And it's amazing the information you get. But only secure leaders and parents will do that. And the other option is to bring out outside resources to come in and do you an assessment. I'm sorry, Doc.
No, that's very helpful, very impactful, very strategic. That was awesome, General. Now I want to allow Dean Andrews to weigh in. I see you, Dean. Come on and weigh in for us, please, sir.
Well, Honore, we can't let you get away from here without saying that Southern University, as I calculated, has produced 10 generals. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I'm assuming that's not by accident. Could you kind of share with us what may have happened at places like Southern University and at HBCUs in terms of a disproportionate number of African Americans reaching the level of the general office in the military?
Yeah, I think there's a legacy in the Jaguar Nation, and you can go across several disciplines. The military is just one of them, where we have had this string of excellence over the last few decades. You got to remember, when I came in the Army in 1971, there had only been 6 African-American generals.
Right.
And today, on average, we got about 30 in the Army at any given time. So things change. The opportunities change. And when those opportunities change, those graduates that came out during the Vietnam War were the first ones from Southern and we had a lot of young men from Southern go to Vietnam that were generals. I might be the first one that graduated from Southern that was not in Vietnam. And Vietnam, coming out of college with a degree, some of them many of them went to Vietnam twice. So they came out decorated warriors. Those 8 that preceded me. And then I came out the last year troops were in Vietnam and did not have carry the honor of all the combat badges. But those were a lot of decorated officers, those first 8. When it became fashionable or acceptable in the 70s, mid 60s, late 60s, to promote Southern graduates or African Americans to general officer. You got me? They had the combat experience. They could not be denied. And many of them, that 8, were within 3 or 4 years of graduating at Southern. They all were there around the same time. It's like a 4-year group that the stars fell on. And they created that cluster. Then since then, I'm number 9 and there's been one after. But those 8 came at the right time with all that combat experience and a change in the government. There's a story of Colin Powell. A general used to tell me about Colin Powell when he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And the way it used to work, they would have the general officer board, which normally 15 people that vote up and down. They'd have personal discussions. And that was okay unless somebody on the board didn't like you for whatever reason. And sometimes they didn't like you because of what you look like or who you look like. And much of that's gone about, but I can tell you right now in the Army, under talent management, there will be no pictures in the promotion package. So this is a national board, and we're going to see what's going to happen when we don't know the race or the ethnicity of the officer we're selecting for general. But I think that's what explained it, and that's why there's only 2 of us after that first group of 8 that it appeared that it slowed down. But what we had was a group of them got selected because of those hot years of Vietnam between 65 and 70. a lot of them came out as combat experienced lieutenant colonels and majors. And when the time set, they were ready to get promoted, which was a big qualification factor to become general. And that had a lot to do with it. And they did well. They represented well. As Dr. Wadley and many of our instructors at Southern were veterans. They had gone to school on it's that point where we lift people out of Railroad Street. They came back from World War II and they took advantage, the male officers took advantage of having been drafted in the Army and came back and got their degrees. And they became educators and some of them became professors. And that attributed to that culture at Southern. It wasn't unusual to go into a class and the professor would see you in your ROTC uniform and he would tell you a military experience he had had, and sometimes she had had during their sermon service.
Did you have a follow-up question, Dean Andrews, or response?
Also, you said it only been 6 before this sort of dramatic increase. What did the military do? Did the military change in terms of its training of officers, in terms of making sure that they had a opportunity for all people to reach that particular rank?
Well, they never used the word quota. And there's some federal statutes that prohibit that. But leaders have a way to work around quotas. When I was a major in the staff college, matter of fact, the guy just died a few weeks ago, because that story about Colin Powell failed to tell you was the guy went back to brief Colin when he was the chairman, and he said, "How many brigadiers did we get this year?" Oh, and he tells the story, "We got 1. And they promote about 30 brigadiers every year. The Army Officer Corps is about 10% African American, about 10, 15% African American. They got 1 out of 30. So Colin said he asked the guy, and the guy was very proud, "Did you pick the best ones?" The guy said, "Oh yeah, we got the best ones." And then there would be a civilian in the Pentagon would go run around trying to get them to reopen the board to try to lift 1 or 2 more people, African Americans, to general officer. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't work. But we've gone from that system to where we are today in the Army, that the promotion packet, when you go in to do a promotion board, it will not have pictures on it. We're trying to take some of the biases out of the selection process, because all of us have certain biases. And those biases have had impact on minorities and women. And we're trying to focus on talent. And that's a new procedure they're putting in. And obviously there will be some people on the board that know people by name, but many of them, when I can remember being on several of these promotion boards, the first thing you looked at was the picture. You wanted to make a personal connection with that person. And you either gave them an 8, 9, or a 10. And we all have our biases. You know the rest of that story. So the Army is trying to take that out. And it is a current day of conversation in the Army right now to ensure that we don't slip backwards in the selection of senior officers in the Army, because that is a indication that we could be slipping backwards. For instance, the Marines have never had a 4-star African American officer, nor a 4-star woman. And this year, the Air Force has the first service chief, General Brown, I think his name is. is the new Chief of Staff of the Air Force. So it's still a relevant topic, and the Army is dealing with it. And they're centered around, we, at the end of the day, are a reflection of society, because we come from society and we bring those biases with us. Let's not forget that. And it has to be dealt with, because at the end of the day, when you get in that foxhole, we've got to trust one another. And it's not based on our ethnicity, our agenda. We have to have trust, because we have to get synergy out of every formation. We got to see first, understand first, and act first. You get that by trust. And you get that through teamwork. But that means when that operation's over, everybody got an opportunity to get promoted too. But it's a relevant conversation today, Dean, in the military. And there's some good writings coming out on talent management. If you'd like, I'll share it with you. The Army's put a good bit of research, or you can find it online, on how they are working through the issue of talent management, which is something I think they kind of borrowed from the civilian sector in a lot of ways, or academicians that put it together for the Army. And the other services are starting to come that way also on how they're going to deal with talent management.
Great. I think we've arrived to the point of closing thoughts, and we're going to shift back to Dean Andrews. We just really want to thank General Honore for just a transformational, impactful conversation. And I was really impacted by your knowledge base, General. And again, thank you for your service to our country. And we really appreciate yours taking this time to share your leadership journey with us and really helping us to be successful leaders and emerging leaders. So Dean Andrews, we're going to shift back to you for some closing thoughts around tonight's conversation.
Well, thank you, General Honore. We always appreciate your willingness to share information. The College of Business is always open to you in terms of leadership. We're moving with Dr. Jackson to increase exposure to our students to real, authentic leaders, individuals who basically have walked the walk, not just talk the talk. And so we look at leaders learning from other leaders. And our students, we want them to go out and to be future global business leaders. And we feel more or less that combining the theory with practice will help them more or less to be more competitive as they go out into the business world. The military probably has produced more leaders than any other organization. And so therefore there must be something that you as generals and others who have led the military can share with the civilian world in terms of how we can be more supportive and how we can share the success. As you say more or less in your book, that basically the purpose of business is not to make money so much as to solve people's problems. And so we hope that our leaders will be ethical leaders and will go out more or less and help solve society's problems. Those people on Wall Street, Main Street, and most of all, Railroad Street. Because as you showed in your picture of Washington crossing the Delaware, they left the people from Railroad Street out of the picture. We want to bring Railroad Street into the picture. And so I think that's a responsibility that we have as leaders in academia, in business, and in military, as well as public organizations. So thank you very much for your service. As they said, you brought order to disorder during Katrina, and we shall always be thankful for you for telling people to take the guns down. You're here more or less to serve the people, not more or less to take vengeance on the people. And so we thank you for your service.
Thank you, Dean. SU 71, go Jaguars. Encourage young people to get in business. When somebody in the family go in business, it lifts the entire family. Encourage them to go in business, to be business people, because it can lift the whole family. It's the fastest way to create multi-generational wealth. Encourage them, let them not fear to be in business and to serve their customers like they want to be served. Bless you, that's your nation. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, again and Dean Andrews for this invite to speak.
Thank you so much, General. We thoroughly enjoyed it. We really appreciate your thoughtful conversations. And I want to just give a shout out to our audience members who were very impactful tonight. This would not have been successful without your participation and your input. So thank each and every one of you audience members for contributing tonight. All of your contributions, all of your comments in the chat space, participating in our poll events. You have been a stellar audience. And again, thank you, thank you, thank you. What I want you guys to do for me real quickly is to unmute yourselves. And in that process, I want you to tell the general thank you as we get ready to depart tonight. So unmute yourselves, and I want everyone to shout out to the general, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, General.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you folks back next week for week 5 of 7. Have a great week. See you next week, folks. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great evening,
Bye.
folks. Thank you for your contributions.
Bye. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, everyone. See you
Okay.
back next week.